Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. It is Linda J here, and I just wanted to do a little bit different video today. Normally it's the couponing, which I love sharing with you guys. I want everybody to save money. However, I felt it was important that I share my cancer journey, just in the hopes that even if it helps one woman going through something similar, I would like to be able to help. So it was cervical cancer, so there will be some talk about blood, but not a lot, and I'll try not to be too TMI, but let's see, I'm a little nervous, so bear with me. It started in 2017. In the beginning of the year, I started having bleeding in between or after intercourse. So like I never had bleeding between my periods or anything like that. I was on birth control and had been for many years. So we know our bodies, and I knew something was wrong. So I ended up contacting my doctor. We had a primary care physician that my whole family used, and had been with him for, I don't even know how many years. I think I started with him when I was 17. So I trusted him. He, took care of my whole family, delivered both of our daughters. So set up an appointment, did a pelvic exam and pap smear. He said, I think you have a friable cervix. So he wasn't real alarmed, which he tended not to get alarmed over anything. So he said, well, we'll wait till the test results come back and then we'll see what we're gonna do. And I just knew something was wrong. And I know they say not to Google, but we all do it. And I was pretty sure I had cervical cancer, just based on the way my body was acting and with the bleeding. There really wasn't anything else to explain it. So I waited for the test results. His office called me and said, oh yeah, we got the test results back. There were some abnormal cells and the doctor wants to see you back in 6 months. And I was shocked, because I'm like, I came into, your office to see you because I'm having bleeding issues. And it was almost as if when the test results came back, he didn't even look at my chart. So I was a little taken aback by that, but I waited a little bit longer, a couple months out, and the bleeding had gotten worse. Like I would go from, like basically the whole month I'd have bleeding, except for maybe a few days. So it was bad. I confided in my dear friend, and she kind of gave me the boost, the confidence to go back to my doctor and say, hey, look, I need a referral to a gynecologist. Something needs to be done. I can't wait 6 months to have this taken care of. So when I called the doctor's office, they did set up an appointment. The soonest they had was, I think, in a couple weeks, so not too long. Well, this was now July, so this started in the beginning of the year. I saw him in March, and then now this is the beginning of July. I think it was July 3rd. He did the exact same thing he did before. Pelvic exam, pap smear. He said, it doesn't even matter what the results are, I'll probably have to refer you to a gynecologist. Kind of what I wanted in the first place. But again, he didn't say that he noticed anything or felt anything or was concerned. That was it. So I said, okay. And I wanted to take that minute right there just to, reiterate, we are women. We have, things like vaginas and cervixes and ovaries, and we should never be ashamed or feel shamed to talk about them, or if we have a problem with them. So please make sure that you advocate for yourself. And like in my case, I knew something was wrong. So I should have pushed harder the first time, but hindsight's 20/20. So my message is, make sure you advocate for yourself. And if you don't like the answer that, your doctor is giving you, because I feel like a lot of doctors, when it comes to our female issues, it's like, oh, that happens, it'll go away. Or, oh, those cysts are common, they'll go away. But when it's not common and it is a bigger problem, it can be way worse if it's untreated and not taken care of. So just don't be afraid, speak up for yourself. So got the test results back the second time, and he said, or he didn't call me, his office called again and said, yep, there was some looks like precancerous cells, so we're referring you to a gynecologist. And the gynecologist was well, it was actually our women's center here. We're very, very blessed here. We have a huge medical mile where we have all kinds of specialists, all kinds of top surgeons, top people in their fields, a big cancer center, and we have a new women's pavilion. So that's great. So the women's center called me, and they actually were like, do you want a certain doctor or do you want first available? Well, this had been going on for quite a while, so for me, I wanted first available. Got in, saw the gynecologist, and the first thing he said to me after the pelvic exam was, you have a large mass on your cervix. And he said, now, we have to see if it's a tumor from your uterus, like pushing down on the cervix, or if it's actually a tumor on the cervix. And he said the cervix, having a tumor on the cervix is worse. We don't want that. Now, I did forget in between the time that I saw my doctor and my new gynecologist, I had a very scary situation. I'm waiting to see the gynecologist, and I had the day off from work, and I was getting ready, took a shower. I had to bring my daughter, it was in the summer, of course, in July, and I was bringing her to camp that day. And my older daughter was home as well. My husband had already left for work. I was in the shower, and the bleeding would not stop. I couldn't even get out of the shower. It was very, very scary. I thought I was dying. I mean, I don't even have a diagnosis yet, but I don't know. I thought the worst. And it was very scary because my kids were home, and I'm sorry, I didn't want them to have to deal with it or see me like that. But unfortunately, I had to call for them and said, hey, you gotta call Dad and get him home from work, and he has to bring me to the emergency room. And the emergency room, I basically told them, in a couple days I'm supposed to see this new gynecologist. They checked with him, and they had to cauterize my cervix, hopefully that it would hold until, to stop the bleeding until I saw him. And so it was very scary because they were telling me, if this happens again, you have to go to the emergency room because you're losing blood. So it can be a pretty serious situation pretty quickly. So back to seeing the gynecologist. So he put an order in for a CT scan. He said, I need to see, where the tumor is. Okay, fine. And from this point on, everything that they needed from me or needed to have me do was urgent. So he put the order in for a CT. I think they got me in like within a week. Had the CT scan, and he called me at work, and he said, I remember this day. Where we sat at work, it was kind of an open area, so I went in the back room, which actually had a door. It wasn't really a secure place, but it was better than being out in the open for everybody to hear or see. And he told me, he said, I'm sorry, it's not what we had hoped for. It is, you do have a large tumor on your cervix. It is cancer. And I just, you think about everything, and you in that moment, it's like you're sad, you're scared, you're angry, you're like, how bad is it? And you can't have any of those answers yet. So I tried to hold it together and ended up calling my husband, who was in a meeting, and that wasn't the best idea, but I needed him. So I told him, and his boss told him to leave work and go, be with me. And my boss wasn't at work at the time, but I talked with her, and she said the same thing. You need to go process. And I think one of the the two things that got me were, one, how did this happen? Like I said earlier, I had been on birth control for many years, so I did go to the doctor. I had my pelvic exams and pap smears on a regular basis, every year, year and a half. Maybe there was one, 2-year gap in there, but still, I wasn't missing, like 5 years. I haven't been in 5 years, and that's how it happened. So I was very upset. I felt like it shouldn't have happened, like somebody missed something, or a lab result was wrong, or so I was very upset with that, because I knew that I was doing my part in going to the doctor. So I was upset. I had a lot of anger there. And then I was scared, because I had daughters, I had a husband. I felt like if this had been missed and became a large tumor, how bad is it? So ended up, the gynecologic oncologist got me in, again, within a week. They had an appointment, they fit me in. Like I said, everything from this point on is urgent. And met with her, and things, she had a game plan. She said, what we're gonna do is we're gonna treat it with external radiation plus chemo. The chemo is a lower dose, so it just, it kind of boosts the radiation treatments. And the radiation was gonna be every day, Monday through Friday. Then we were going to do internal radiation, and then we were going to follow it up with regular chemo at the end. And their goal was to get rid of the tumor, get rid of the cancer. And so that was her game plan, but she said, I do have to speak with the tumor board. We go over it with all the radiologists, with the other gynecologic oncologists, then the PAs, everybody that would be involved with my treatment. They kind of review it and make sure that they're all in agreement that's the best course of treatment. So I figured I had a couple weeks before, because they weren't going to meet, and I think for another week. And she said, just, make sure if you do have any bleeding that you, call us and let us know. So I'm like, okay, so we've got a little bit of kind of course of action here. And she said she needed a PET scan. So they did fit that in. That was only like, I think a couple days later, they were able to get me in for the PET scan, because she needed to see where, if there were any lymph nodes or if it had spread. And so they could, piece it, not piece it together, but to see what stage I was in, to stage it. So the PET scan came back. Actually, the PET scan day was another scary incident, because after the PET scan, I think because of the radioactive stuff that they put in you, it actually caused it to bleed again. And I should have gone to the emergency room, but I was bleeding really, really bad on the way home. And I ended up I stayed in bed, and my family was like, you need to go to the hospital. And I was like, no, I'll be okay, because I didn't want to go to the hospital. Up to this point, I had never really been sick in my life. The only time I had been in the hospital was when I had my children. Never broke any bones, surgeries, nothing. So for me, that was scary. I didn't want to go to the hospital. So I was okay that night. I drank lots of water, and but going back on that, if something were to happen again, I would go to the hospital. I should have called my doctor right away. But what I ended up doing was the next day, went to a dentist appointment that I had. I wanted to get that out of the way, since I was going to have these treatments and I wasn't going to be able to go. So I went to the dentist in the morning, and then drove out to my job, which was about 40 minutes from where I live, and called the doctor from there. And she was like, well, you're gonna need to come in. So they could fit me in the afternoon. And then that day I went there with my husband, and they admitted me to the hospital. So everything was so rushed and so scary, and I just wanted to share my story too, because I felt like there was nobody. I mean, the medical staff was great. I'm so thankful that I had this team. I had the hospital, I had the cancer pavilion, from techs to nurses to the surgeon. Everybody was great. But like, there were no support groups. They said they used to have a women's gynecologic cancer support group, but there was no participation. I felt very alone. I knew my family was there and they were awesome. And I can't even imagine how scary it was for them as well. But to not have other women to say, you know what, you're gonna get through this. Or, you know what, you need me in the middle of the night, you call me. I didn't have that. So there was a point where I was very, very low. I was very depressed and I felt alone. So alone. But you keep pushing, you know. And it was scary in the hospital because right away they sent me off to CT because they needed to take more scans, and then they had to tattoo my pelvis where they were going to do the radiation, and then they had to fit me for the cradle that I had to sit in for when I had the radiation, because that's a mold that's specific for you. And then I had to have my first radiation treatment, and then I had to, you know, so they're wheeling me all over the hospital, and I mean, my husband can't go with me. It's just the patient. So it was scary and very lonely. And then I had my first chemo treatment in the hospital, and then they sent me home to then start coming back and forth. And I worked for a great company who at the time set me up to work from home, so I could go, since I lived real close to where my treatments were, I could go home, I could work from home, go to treatments, come back and work if I still felt okay. And if I didn't, I could take time. So they were really great. So we went through 8 weeks of the radiation plus the chemo. And radiation in the pelvis area is like, you know, when this is how I always thought things were. It was like, okay, your uterus is here, your bladder's up here, you know, this is over here, but everything is real close together. So it's, when you have radiation, it's affecting everything that's nearby. So your colon, your bladder, your ureter, your vagina, everything is affected. So made it through the 8 weeks of that, and I was in a lot of pain. But you know, you're like, you got to go through the pain to get to the end, you know, get to the good part. And then the internal radiation, I'd never really heard of that before. I never had anyone close to me go through any type of cancer, let alone something like cervical cancer. So I found out that the internal radiation, basically I went into the hospital on a Tuesday morning for surgery. They implanted it's like a bracket in your vagina, and then later in the day the physicist figured out how much radiation you needed and put that in a pod, and then the doctor implanted that into the bracket into your vagina. And because you have radiation in you, you have to stay in the hospital in a lead-lined room, and you can't move. So you know, you have a catheter, and they give you like Imodium, so you don't have to go number 2. So just an unpleasant experience. I had to do that for a full 24 hours the first time. No, excuse me, 48 hours the first time. And then the second week, same scenario, go in on Tuesday, have the surgery, then the pod gets implanted, and that time it was a 24-hour period. So very uncomfortable. And you know, through this, you know, you're really sore and you're tired and you're fatigued. And then they were like, okay, so now, you know, through all this, you're having checkups and everything. And then I had to have chemo. So the chemo was a higher dose. So it was every other week. And that went through the end of the year. I think the 21st of December was my last chemo. So that was just before Christmas. But prior to that, earlier in December, they sent me in for a CT scan because my pulse, my heartbeat had been really fast. And at first they couldn't figure out what it was, but then my doctor was like, I think you have a blood clot. Sent me in for the CT scan. Yep, you have a blood clot. You got to go to the hospital. We're going to admit you to the hospital. I'm like, okay, can anything else go wrong? I'm like, you know, it was crazy. Just a crazy half of the, you know, the end of the year. So they figured the blood clot actually came from that first time they admitted me to the hospital. They forgot to put the massager things on my legs because I was laying down, not from the time for the internal radiation, because during that time I had those on the whole time. It was probably something that was already in the works and then continued on. So, you know, things happen, you know, that's kind of comes with the territory, but I ended up having to do shots for the blood thinners twice a day, in the morning and the evening. It was supposed to be 6 months. Ended up being a little bit longer. I thought I could do them myself, but let me tell you, I got home and nobody was at the house, and I must have sat there for a good 2 hours. I can do it. Yep, I got it. Nope, can't. Yep, nope. So bless my husband. He ended up doing my shot before he'd go to work and then in the evening when he was home. So not fun, but again, it's part of the process, part of my journey. And, you know, everybody is going to go through different experiences. I just wanted to share mine so that if you come across something that's, you know, nothing's in a textbook, nothing's like written in stone, this is how it goes. So hopefully that, you know, I'm here, and hopefully it gives you guys some hope too. And if you know anybody that's going through something like this. So, beginning of the year, thinking things are going to be pretty good. We're start a new year fresh, and we were going to have a PET scan later. You know, you have to wait till, you know, the radiation is not active, so that you can do a PET scan, see if you've gotten the cancer, make sure those lymph nodes that lit up are, you know, not lighting up anymore, and that we got, you know, the cancer. I didn't mention it before, but I was staged as a 1B2. So I don't know all the particulars on how they figure that out. I know it has to do with if it's spread. Like I said, I had some lymph nodes that did light up, and that I think came into play with the staging. But so yeah, so we're going into the next year thinking this is it. We're gonna come out with a new year, fresh start, and ended up having some really severe abdominal pain late February. And of course, my first thought is the cancer is back, or it didn't go away. We didn't get it. And so I called my doctor's office. They got me in. They said, well, from what you're describing, it almost sounds like, you know, a bladder infection or in that area. Now, mind you, the radiation is going to do damage to other areas. So they were like, well, what we're going to do is we're going to up your PET scan, and in the meantime, we'll send you over to your doctor, your regular doctor, which I did get a new primary doctor, and he's great. So I went to go see him because they wanted him to check for bladder infection and